church leaders are striking back. They are raising their voices. They are joining in unity to stand up to this Trump regime. We've seen this in Chicago and in many of the other cities invaded by the Trump Gestapo. And to me, whether you're religious or not religious, whether you're Catholic, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, atheist, Hindu, whatever your religion is or isn't, I think at the end of the day, we need to have people with moral authority use that moral and formal authority to speak out. And we see in Chicago, for example, Pastor David Black, and he's been on the front lines, quite literally. He's been in front of the detention center there outside of Chicago, praying with, on behalf, for the individuals who have been thrown into this concentration camp. You'll recall that Pastor Black was someone who's been shot at in the head with non-lethal rounds, which can be lethal, though, by the way. Don't let the name fool you. And he had the opportunity to speak with Katie Phang from the MeidasTouch network in one of the most inspirational interviews I've seen recently. So, Katie Phang, take it away.
If you were looking for inspiration, I've got it for you. I had the privilege of sitting down with Pastor David Black of Chicago. And Pastor Black, the video went viral of him being shot in the body and in the head with pepper balls by the Trump administration's ICE. Pastor Black has a message of hope, but in such an inspiring way. He talks about how democracy is not a spectator sport and that there has been a true revival of faith. And look, even if you're not someone who is a believer, he knows that there is a place now, there is an energy that exists to fight back against fascism, authoritarianism, and to co-create, that's the word he uses, co-create a democratic world that we all deserve to live in. Take a listen. And joining me now, I have the privilege of being able to spend some time with Pastor David Black. He is the ordained teaching elder at the First Presbyterian Church of Chicago. Pastor, it is such an honor to be able to hang out with you and see how you're doing and to hopefully get some words of faith and wisdom and hope from you during this holiday season. How are you today?
Thank you, Katie. I'm honored to be on your show, and I'm doing pretty well. Thank you.
So, Pastor Black, you have your own, I'd say, following locally in Chicago. You have a congregation, and I know that you've been doing a lot of work in several communities in that city, but you recently got some viral fame in not the right ways, right? When you were the victim of what I'm saying is a total assault, not only on your First Amendment rights, but a physical assault and attack on you by members of the federal government. I'm going to show the video very quickly, and then I'll have some questions for you on the other side, but let's play this now. I mean, speechless when I saw it the first time, speechless again. Pastor, I understand that you were saying to those officers that were up, elevated on the top of that roof at Broadview ICE facility, detention facility in Chicago, you were telling them, repent and believe the good news that the kingdom of God has come near. And that was pretty much about it. So talk about what happened and how horrific it was to be the victim of an assault like that.
It was horrific. And I was just one of many, many people who were assaulted that day by ICE. Their attacks have been vicious and unprovoked. I've been going to Broadview as a pastor, and I've been going with other clergy as well. We all believe what Jesus teaches us is to pray and minister for those who are oppressed and also for those oppressing them. And it's so clear to us that what's happening at Broadview is an egregious breach of trust and of human rights against our vulnerable neighbors. And that many people are being put into a morally compromised position by being paid and getting their debts forgiven so that they can go out onto Chicago city streets and bully people and violate their civil rights. And yeah, when I arrived at Broadview that day, I knew that there had been assaults on some people already who were there peacefully protesting. And I felt moved to minister to those ICE agents standing on the roof who were just kind of looming there and brandishing their weapons. And so I moved onto the sidewalk and I started praying for them and calling them to repent in the most traditional language that my religion offers. And while I was in the middle of using the words of Jesus to repent and believe the good news, they opened fire on me and shot me a couple of times in the head and many times in my body as well. And there was so much chaos that day. It was so clear that they had been so poorly trained, or that the alternative is that they had been deliberately told to escalate violence against peaceful protesters, maybe as a maneuver to see what they can get away with, because we know that their violence against civilians throughout Chicago escalated after that. So they might just be testing the limits, and shooting a pastor in the head is, I think, just a part of that. The Trump administration trying to find out what they can get away with.
Did it ever cross your mind that it would be possible that you, as a member of the clergy, dressed as a member of the clergy, would ever fall victim to being attacked by ICE or the federal government?
Before I was shot the first time, it didn't cross my mind. Afterwards, it seemed in some ways like the most obvious thing in the world, because Jesus put his body in the way of evil and suffered consequences for it, was executed for it. And I think the spark that came out of that video that really impacted Christians across this country was seeing in real time the consequences of preaching the gospel against an empire that's intent on dismantling our civil society and persecuting the poorest and most vulnerable members of our society. So it's provoked a revival of faith among so many people. I've gotten hundreds of letters from across the country and emails and calls, both from people who are oddly inspired by what they saw in that video, and also people who are reaching out to tell me that they wish that the officers had used live rounds. And it's really jarring to get both extremes, but it's been a very inflammatory moment.
You were a part of a successful lawsuit that was a coalition partner of mine, the ACLU out of Chicago, representing a whole bunch of journalists, you and other protesters who had your constitutional rights just trampled upon, yours including the right to assemble for purposes of religious freedom. We also know that there's been some litigation brought because at Broadview, the detainees can't even get communion, even though for years that was a possibility for them. ICE has now said, no, you cannot have access, even though they've had to sue, they being members of the clergy. Sometimes the rule of law helps, right? Sometimes the legal system can be an effective ally. Judge Sarah Ellis in Chicago in federal court entering a multi-100-page injunction detailing the evidence that supported the claims that you and others were making. Your thoughts about the fact that you ended up being part of litigation, actually, to be able to make sure that your faith was protected?
Yeah, I'm so grateful for the work that Judge Ellis and her team did on that case. It was really moving. You know, I spend a lot of time with people who are really disenchanted about American institutions and saving the day. And I've been really encouraged by the civil servants that I've met in this process who are really devoted to improving the systems of this country and protecting our democracy. And at the same time, Judge Ellis's ruling is such a low bar just to say that our civil rights should be protected and we should be allowed to exercise our First Amendment rights without being attacked with chemical weapons. It seems like such a low bar, and that it took such an enormous effort from some of the most talented lawyers in the country. Says so much about the moment that we are in. And also the fact that immediately ICE flouted that the rule of law. Within an hour of the ruling, we received word that ICE had thrown had thrown tear gas in Little Village, primarily Latino community in the west side of Chicago. So they're just showing open defiance and contempt for the rule of law. And I do think it's part of a larger effort and strategy to see what they can get away with as they move into other cities.
You know, it doesn't escape my notice all of the time, the weaponization of religion, which has happened for centuries. Let me be very clear, right? To be able to justify some of the atrocities that have been perpetrated under the guise of religion. But in this instance, there's a whole lot of Sunday Christians that exist in the Republican Party and in this administration. They like to invoke evangelical Christianity and other type of faith weapons to be able to say, we are going to continue to oppress the vulnerable, the weak, those amongst us that don't have representation. You have said that your call as a Christian is to be in places where people are being persecuted and oppressed. Jesus himself went to hell to liberate the captives. Broadview is an incarnate instance of the gates of hell in Chicagoland. To me, there's no question of where Christians are called to be and proclaim the good news right now. I know it's a part of your faith and it's part of who you are, Pastor, to do this work, but talk about how challenging it can be, though, even as a man of faith, to face this type of just cruelty and this just abject hatred for people just because their skin may be brown, just because they may look different than what others want them to be.
It is challenging. I think a lot of Christians are being called into an awakening right now to recognize this is a moment of revelation. The reality is that there have almost always been two Christianities. There's been the Christianity of the oppressed and the Christianity of the oppressor. Ever since Christianity became the state religion of the Holy Roman Empire, virtually every fascist regime in the West has claimed Christianity and used it to give the veneer of moral authority to the atrocities that they commit. And the Trump administration is no different. And this has been a long time coming. The Christianity in America has, some would argue, been corrupted from the very beginning and was perhaps saved by those who were enslaved and decided to take on Christianity as their own religion and really bring it back to its roots, the gospel roots. But I would say in the last 50, 60 years, Christianity has particularly been corrupted in this country and turned into really just the underpinning of ethno-fascism. And I think that there's been a long game that some people have been playing, trying to prop up their ideas about how society should look and how white supremacy should continue to dominate our norms and institutions, and using Christianity and using Jesus as props for a political agenda. But the Bible talks about this, right? And in a way that's been so co-opted by those Christians as well. When we talk about the Antichrist, who so many evangelical and fundamental Christians are obsessed with, the Antichrist in the book of Revelation is a figure that claims to be Jesus, but is used for the political ends of the empire. And we're seeing that play out in real time for not the first time in history. And a lot of Christians are awakening to that fact, including Christians in conservative churches who are realizing how much they've been lied to. I've been talking to a lot of Christians in more conservative states and Christians of conservative denominations who are also realizing that what we are practicing at Broadview, what clergy are practicing at Broadview, is really just the most fundamental form of Christianity, to show up with our bodies in the way that Jesus did and advocate for the rights and the dignity of our neighbors, even at the cost of our own safety. And it's been inspiring to me to see how many Christians are really picking up that call and taking it seriously. And I think one of the impacts of this moment, maybe in some ways because of what Trump is doing and not despite it, is this revival of really pure and progressive Christianity that is organized. I think we're seeing the emergence of a religious left in this country. And I'm very, very hopeful about what that will mean for shaping the moral conversation in America going forward.
I want people to understand, Pastor, that it's not just Christianity that is being represented in the works that are being done at Broadview. I had the pleasure of also speaking to Reverend Paul Rauschenbusch from the Interfaith Alliance, and we were talking about how at Broadview and at other places across the United States, we have pastors, reverends, standing next to priests, standing next to rabbis, standing next to imams, and then there's people that have no faiths, not in the bad way, but they just don't believe in organized religion, but they're standing there shoulder to shoulder to protect, defend, and to be able to uplift the messaging that you cannot do this. You cannot oppress people in this way. This is not our country, and this is not who we are. How important is it to have that unity right now when normally these are wedge issues in communities of color and in different religions?
It's remarkable, and it's a coalition that nobody saw coming. The collective that's been assembling at Broadview is multi-faith and does include many people of no faith. And the solidarity among that assembly, the democracy of how we make decisions, the way that it is leaderless and not formed by any one ideology or idea of how the world should look, it's been profoundly inspiring to me. And as I've gotten to talk to many elected leaders, I keep encouraging them to look at that collective as one small representation of a much broader political movement in this country. People at the grassroots are taking responsibility for our democracy in a way that honestly we should have been doing all along. But in this moment, there is an imperative that's really bringing people together. And in the midst of it, there's a new interfaith movement that's blossoming as well. It used to be that interfaith work in America meant let's get imams and rabbis and priests to sit at a table, and if they don't argue, then it'll be a revolution.
Yes.
But now what it means is that we just show up and struggle for justice together. We share a vision that's rooted in our faiths, and it gives us this remarkable alignment right now. I hesitate to use the word unity because I don't think that unity needs to be the goal. But when we are coordinated and we are aligned, we can work as a democratic entity. And that includes conflict, and that includes disagreement and dissent, and something much better that is productive of those things than if we just collapsed all our differences and said we have to be unified for this moment. This is a project of world building that we're experiencing at Broadview, and democracy being revived. And the fact that faith leaders get to be a part of it, and a deeply rooted part of it, has been so wonderful to me. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity, because in the same way that many of the people that I pastor are disenchanted with American norms and institutions, many are also disenchanted with religion or religious institutions. And many of those gathering at Broadview are, they're anarchists. They're people who left the church a long time ago, don't practice any religion, are totally disenchanted with what it means. But there's a deep love and really powerful coalition forming between clergy and people who have no religious background. And it makes me, again, just so hopeful about the political future of this movement. And I hope that our elected leaders will see that and follow the vision of those who have a vision in this country right now.
You've also been very clear too, Pastor. You have also says that it was Jesus's practice to show up, and that's what we are called to do in this moment, particularly Christians of privilege. That phrase stuck with me, Christians of privilege. You are correct that there are several of us, Christians or otherwise, that are places and positions of privilege that have the obligation to speak up. I have couched it in the way of, what side of history are you going to be on when it mattered the most? I am motivated by my own personal faith and love in humanity. I also have a daughter who I want to make sure I can look at and say, I did the right thing when it counted the most. What are the words that you want to also share to tell people why they should also be motivated and engaged? I use the word activated. I want people to be more activated in their levels of comfort. It doesn't mean they have to protest or march, but they have to do something right now, because just sitting on the sidelines isn't just going to hack it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think one of the things that has been discouraging about this moment is how many people have been pointing to me and using words like hero and leader, as if now I speak for a mass of people. I don't. I'm just one person among many. And the people that I stand with are brilliant and have such deep and important vision. They don't all have the platform that I have. So I want to be able to use moments like these to amplify their message and their beliefs. I think everyone who has grown up in this country has been acclimated to being a consumer, and that extends to how we participate in our democracy. A lot of people treat democracy like it's a spectator sport. Like we need to find the next hero, we need to find and elect and consume the next leader and their rhetoric and their whatever it is that they stand for and their brand. But that's not how democracy works, and it never has been. And we are not spectators. We're not audience members. And we need to wake up to the fact that there is no stage. Like we are all in this together, and democracy only works when we take responsibility for the norms and institutions that we share. I think there were a couple of generations where people just kind of assumed that no matter what happens in the world, we'll always be able to lean back on the norms and institutions of our democracy. Like they're pillars that will always be there. But the reality is that we need to co-create these things in real time. And what we're experiencing is the erosion of our democracy because people aren't in the practice of doing the things our Constitution calls us to do, like assemble peaceably and call for redress of our grievances and figure out again and again with our neighbors what it means to be a society, a pluralistic society that says yes and to everyone's beliefs and values. Democracy is a beautiful thing when it works, and it works when we take responsibility for it. And I just want to see that broader activation that you're talking about, that awakening. And I think that it is happening. And it's happening at the grassroots. It's happening in the places that, frankly, many news cameras don't get to, because a lot of people would be at great risk if they were really speaking their minds in a public way right now. And so to get back to the question of privilege, I think it's so important that those of us who do have, like I have a little bit of institutional support from my church and my denomination, and I have all the privileges that come with being embodied the way that I am in America. And I'm just so grateful that I am trusted by my peers in this movement to speak on behalf of what is happening and what it is that we believe in and value as a collective.
Just a point of personal privilege to be able to lean on you right now as a Christian. I had mentioned at the beginning of our time together, this is a tough time for some people. The holidays can be a beautiful, beautiful time, but they can be challenging in so many different ways. They can be times of loss. They can remind you of loss. They can remind you of things that are missing. Even when we are celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, and we are looking at all the wonderful things that are attendant with this time of the year. Maybe some parting words for those that are tuning in and listening, that again may or may not be of the religious ilk, but maybe need to hear from you your thoughts about, we're ending 2025 and we're going to embark on a new year shortly. And from your point of having interacted and gone through everything you've been going through this year, your thoughts about having hope. You've spoken of the revival of people in the religious space, but having hope to make sure that we have a renewed faith in just humanity and that we're able to get through this together.
Yeah. This can be such a difficult time of year of people, whether they're stressed about meeting all their family obligations or whether they are lonely and isolated and have nowhere to go and feel at home. I think part of the political revival that I am witnessing in Chicago is people taking responsibility for their neighbors and their neighborhoods. I remember being taught in grade school to be afraid of strangers. And I see that fear of strangers all over the place. And I think that it's contributing so much to the xenophobia and outright racism of what the Trump administration is being allowed to get away with. And I think what I witness all the time is that it stems from people being afraid to be the first to cross that invisible line and to talk to a neighbor, to knock on somebody's door and check in on them, for fear of being awkward, for fear of being rejected, for fear of being the scary stranger. But it's a moment of courage that we can all take to just cross that line and to say hello to somebody, say happy holidays, Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, to bring cookies over to a neighbor and just see what happens when we begin to form those relationships. That is the building block of democracy. When we are isolated and alienated and afraid, it's so easy to control us. But when we're organized and when we have bonds of trust and love, then the weak and insecure strong men who would try to control our nation, our civil society, can't do it. So I really encourage everyone to just take an opportunity this year to talk to a neighbor, get to know somebody who you haven't before, somebody whose name you've forgotten. Be bold enough to say, I've forgotten your name, but I'd like to remember it, and tell me something about how you're doing. Those moments are so small, but so powerful. They really are the building block of the better world that we all want to be a part of. And this is the perfect time of year to do it, because maybe more than any other time of year during the Christmas season, it's a little less weird to step across that line and say hello to a stranger. So I hope that people will be bold and be a friend to somebody who needs a friend.
Pastor David Black, I hope to have the privilege one day to be able to sit in your congregation and be able to hear your sermons. But in the meantime, I am more than honored to have been able to spend this time with you. Thank you again for the time and for all of the hard work. You may not consider yourself to be a hero, but I know that you do occupy that space of honor for so many of us. So thank you for all of the work you're doing. I am incredibly grateful.
Thank you. I'm very humbled by your words and so grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Pastor. Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the MeidasTouch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.